Hey guys, this is a tutorial for Ceramics 2. We are going to work on creating a dish with a sgraffito design. All right, so the first thing is that we're going to roll out a flat slab of clay. You've done this either with the slab roller or with a rolling pin. I'm going to clean the crusties off of my metal rib or my card scraper, whatever you want to call it. I've heard different potters call it different things, but it's this little metallic guy that you got in your kit. All right, I used the slab roller, which means my slab has canvas texture on it, and I am not interested in keeping that. So I'm going to smooth it out real quick. If you forget to do this step, you can smooth it out in your dish. I just find it much quicker and easier to do when it's flat. Flipped it, and I'm going to do the same thing on this side, because then there's less work to do on the bottom. It will pick up a little bit of the texture from the mold, but I want to make it as smooth as possible every step of the way. All right, I'm not going to worry too much about those edges because I am not going to be using them. All right, so I've got my bisque mold. Tuck that under my slab. I'm going to kind of gently place that in here. If you have too much clay and it's making it hard to figure out where to press, cut some of that excess off. There we go. You don't have to get it perfectly the correct size right away. It's easier to do when you can better see what you're doing. All right, it's a little better. So I'm just very gently pressing this in. This is a press mold. There are lots of different kinds of ceramic molds. All right, and then I'm going to trim the excess off so that it's kind of matching up here. I'm going to do that all the way around. All right, probably should have put some background music on or something for y'all. All right. I don't need to get this perfect right away. I am going to smooth it kind of as best as I can to prevent any sharp edges. But it's going to be a little bit easier to smooth it out once the clay has dried a little bit. When it's a little bit closer to a leather hard state, it's literally going to feel kind of like leather. When it gets closer to that leather hard state, it's easier to smooth it like without smushing it. Right now the clay is very soft, what potters will call plastic, and it is just really pliable, which is good for some things, but not so much for others. Like, it was great when we wanted to press a textured roller or stamp into the clay. However, it's not so great for carving and things like that. And if you want it to stand up, you also want to let it dry out a little bit more. All right, I'm going to let this dry more. And when it is in a leather hard state where I can take it out of the bisque mold without it losing its shape, I will do that. To do our sgraffito design, we're going to paint a colored slip over the top of this, and we want it to be not too smushy. We also do not want to let it get to a bone dry state where it's like that very light gray color, it's chalky, because that also it doesn't have the same issue as the too soft clay. If I add a liquid clay to this right now, it's going to get extra smushy, which we don't want. But if the dish is too dry, there's no water left in it, adding that liquid clay with the water is going to increase the danger of your dish cracking. So we want to let it dry just to that leather hard state. All right, we're going to keep going. I've let my dish dry. It was dry enough to pop out of the mold and retain its shape. You can see that it's pretty smooth on the bottom because I did that work ahead of time, smoothing it out. Some things I want to do here are going to be to take my tool, maybe trim some of that stuff away, because I do not want these sharp edges. You can use your finger, you can use a tool. I like to use the plastic tools on this over the metal. I feel like with the metal ones, I tend to maybe cut away more than I mean to. I'm even using sort of the blunt, not sharp edge of the plastic tool. Going kind of slow. So this takes a little bit of time. Gotta be patient with yourself and patient with the medium. So again, it's going to be a lot nicer in the end if you take this time to make these things nice every step of the way. You might want to know how long it takes for the clay to dry in the mold. And the short answer is I don't know. It depends a lot on like how much water was in the clay to start, how humid the air is in the room, whether or not you have it wrapped up and how tightly and what kind of plastic. There's just so many factors. Also, how thick is your slab? Clay is just something you kind of have to keep checking on as often as you possibly can. Even if you're just coming in for open lab and all you do is like check on how wet or dry your piece is, that can be really important. Like figure out if it's ready to work, if it needs to dry a little more, if you need to give it a little spritz to keep it going until you have more time to work on it. That's probably the most important thing to learn in a more advanced ceramics course, is just working with the drying times. I could go back in here with a wet sponge and smooth that edge as well. I tend to not do that very much. I don't like to introduce a lot of moisture back into a ceramic piece because it can increase the chances of it cracking. So I try to just keep an eye on it as much as possible and not add water if I don't need to. If I still needed to work this a lot, I would probably give it a little tiny spritz of water and wrap it up, but this is pretty much where I want it. All right, so I've got a little container of green decorating slips. You can see it's green. I'm gonna really, don't shake it over your piece, I guess. Give it a good shake. I can see the color in the bottom. I wanna get that all mixed into the liquid clay so that I get the full gold color. be careful because these are not always totally airtight. You can see I filled all my canvas and all my tools. So be cognizant of how much cleanup you're gonna need to do. All right, we're getting there. All right, so I have my slip ready, and I have a brush for the slip. Remember, I'm not using this on glazes. We want to only use it for the slips. If it says water on your brush, make sure you're only using it for water. We are going to use those water brushes when we work on our stencils. All right, I'm going to get an even layer of this color on here. It is totally fine if it looks a little bit transparent. Don't worry about it. You do not need to like go over it a million times. I'm maybe going to get a couple layers on here and try to make sure it's really smooth. You can get along the edges if you want. All right, and then we are going to let that dry. In the meantime, I'm going to rinse my brush. I'm going to make sure that my jar is closed. Whenever possible, you can wipe the liquid clay from the rim where the lid is going to attach. That will keep the lids from sticking. Just take a damp sponge and wipe those down. All right, I'm going to pause this for a moment while this dries. All right, so now my slip